Welcome to episode 77 of the Camerosity podcast, the world's one and only open source film photography podcast. My name is Mike Ekman, and we are back with another episode. In our last episode, the guys and I talked about something we know a lot about, buying and selling cameras. For this episode, we're moving on to another topic that some of us know a lot about too, blogging. Although half of the Camerosity hosts have their own vintage camera blog, we thought it would be fun to invite some of our other favorite bloggers to reveal to you all of the behind-the-scenes secrets of running a photography blog. Before we get to that, though, let's do some introductions. Starting us off, from Gainesville, Florida, is the robot professor, Mr. Anthony Rue. Hey, Anthony, how do you load film into a robot camera?
I mean, it's literally just bulk loading into a standard cassette, in the daylight, attaching it, in the darkness, loading it back onto the proprietary reel, and then putting it in the robot.
Next, from Yellow Springs, Ohio, is everyone's positive influence, Mr. Paul Reibold. Hey, Paul, who have you sold something to recently?
To Anthony, I sold something to, and also to Ed Gabe in Lexington, and to Russell Malm in Midland, Texas.
And finally, from Sydney, Australia, is Mr. Photo Thinking himself, Theo Panagopoulos. Is it difficult being both a podcast and blog superstar?
Well, some say it's difficult, some say it's a pleasure. So I kind of lean towards the pleasure side.
All right, I'll have to agree with that one. We've got a few people in the waiting room, so let's let them in. All right, we got some returning callers and some familiar faces. Back again is Alex Lokes and Eric Jason and AJ Gentile, Will Pinkham for 2 episodes in a row, and one more person whose video is off. Mr. Video-less person, you want to introduce yourself?
Sayran is on mute.
Sayran's on mute. That's okay. That's okay. We had Bob Rodoloni try to join us for the last episode. He never could get his mic working, and I was never able to connect with him to go over to his house and try and do some Geek Squad for him to see if we could figure out what's going on, but no big deal. Oh, okay. So Sayran sent us in the chat. I'll read what it says. It says, I'm joining you from a public library in Toronto. I have listened to all your episodes. Thanks for doing what you do. Cheers, Sayran. Sayran, thanks for the feedback. Hopefully you can listen to the unedited version of the show. We spend quite a bit of time editing these to make them sound more listenable.
You mean, Mike, when we don't sound like perfectly radio voiced all the time?
Well, we usually do, but I have to make it, sound like we're trying harder, so. All right. Well, so today's episode is about blogging, and I could see how maybe some people might not see the connection to a podcast, but the reality is everybody, I think, that's either on this show or listens to this show probably heard about it, or at least one of us through some kind of photography website or something along those lines. I've had my website, MikeEkman.com. I'm coming up on 10 years. Theo, you started shortly after I did, right? Wasn't it like 2017 maybe? When did you get started?
Yeah, about 2016, 2017, about then.
Okay. And I think I just stumbled upon one of your reviews. I can't even remember which one it was. And around that same time, I didn't even really dedicate it exclusively to cameras and photography until about 2016. And it was around that time, maybe early 2017, I had some questions about something, some behind the scenes maintenance, how to do something. And I just didn't know who to ask. So there were a few websites that I had gone to, and I had seen, some of these names of these bloggers on Facebook. So I created a Facebook chat of just a couple people. I think Jim Gray was one, James Taccio from Casual Photophile was another, Hamish Gill, maybe one other person. And I was just like, hey guys, I was just curious to know how to do something. And I asked my question, and they were all super helpful. And I really didn't mean for it to go anywhere beyond that, but you know how Facebook Messenger works. Once you have a group of people, unless you actively delete the channel, it just kind of stays there. And then like at some point in the future, I had another question and I asked, and then someone else in that group had a question. They asked us, and then we all started chatting. And then as time went by, we started adding people. We added you, Theo. We added Dan Cooney. Peggy's there. Is that you, Peggy Marsh?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you can hear me. Is that
yes,
all right?
I can. Hey, Peggy.
Yeah, I just woke up.
Oh my goodness, she got up in the middle of the night.
No, I was awake. I can't sleep.
I
think because I've slept so much recently. And then I went, oh, wait a minute. Isn't something happening?
Yes.
There's no video. 'cause
That's
I
okay.
am
That's okay.
still in bed.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Peggy. We love Peggy's another blogger too. So I was just talking about the Facebook chat that we've had now. I mean, gosh, it's been 7 years we've had that channel. We've added some people, a few people have dropped out, and we unofficially call it the Camera Bloggers Alliance. And we've helped each other so many times and inspired each other. And we talk about strategies and if someone's had some if Theo, your whole site crashed one time, right? Didn't I had to FTP in and completely delete
Yeah.
your plugins folder.
Yeah, I basically threw my hands up in the air and screamed, and Mike heard it, and I gave him a log on, and he went in and cleaned
Yeah.
it up for me because I had no idea what to do.
I was either going to fix it or completely wipe it out, but thankfully I fixed it for him. So, we all do talk to each other a lot. We've even coordinated some posts. We did one earlier this year about the dead hands cameras. And wasn't that your idea, Theo, or whose idea was that?
I think it was an interaction between Peggy and myself where Peggy said, I can't remember which camera it was that
I
she
don't
liked
remember.
that
I
camera.
think you'd posted a picture or some post, and I said I'd like it if you don't want it, and then you said that. Yeah.
Yeah, I responded, you'd have to pry it from my dead cold hands. And then I think it was Jim Gray that actually jumped
Yeah.
in and goes, oh, that sounds like a great idea for a post. And we all sort of got together and wrote that same, released it on the same day.
What was cool too is in addition to us kind of coordinating it, didn't we start to find people that none of us even talked to? Like there were like copycat dead hands posts that other people started writing.
Oh yeah. That was really cool.
Yeah, just to see kind of how it inspired. And there's a lot of things that aren't great about social media and the blogosphere and everything. But I really do like the group that we have, and we've all helped each other. I think we all inspired each other. I heard somebody say once before about just artists in general is that if there's another artist that does the same thing as you, they're not your competition, they're your inspiration. And I kind of feel that way with these guys too. So we've had this friendship for several years now. Whether any of the people who aren't bloggers even knew about it, I have no idea. But we do all talk. We do all try to collaborate with each other, and I think that camaraderie has kind of spilled over into these podcasts too. I mean, Alex, you have both. You have a podcast and a blog. Theo obviously does too. Theo blogs or podcasts his own reviews, which I think is really, really cool. Kind of a interesting little, how do you say it? It's like, if you don't want to read my reviews, I could read it for you or something.
Exactly, exactly. Which means you can hear my reviews while you're driving, or if you're trying to get to sleep, one or the other. Hopefully not at the same time.
Where did you get the idea to do that?
Well, I've been thinking it for a while leading up to that, and I thought there has to be another way that people don't want to spend a whole lot of time reading a longish review because my reviews tend to be longish. I tend to shoot a camera for quite a few weeks or months before I actually write a review on it, and many rolls of film. So I go in a bit deep, and I didn't, I thought people don't have that much time these days. And they want to be able to hear the review and then just maybe flick through the pictures. So I thought I'd record it and see if people listen to it, and it gets a little bit of an uptake. I mean, nothing like this podcast, of course, but it does get quite a few downloads where people seem to enjoy listening to it and then
Yeah.
just flicking through the pictures.
I think it's cool to kind of branch out that way too. Alyssa will do a video, a YouTube video that accompanies her post too. And I think that's kind of unique and gives her reviews a little bit of a different angle than just, mine, which is just really, really long and lots of text. I had a number of years ago the desire to try and make some accompanying YouTube videos, and I just never got around to doing it. And whatever spare energy I had ended up going into this podcast. So I'm happy with how that turned out, but I didn't feel the need to continue to explore other types of social media.
I've got to admire people that include video though. I mean, like what Alex does, for instance, it's a whole different field that you have to actually understand how
Sure.
that works and do. And while podcasting and recording and doing audio editing is one thing, add video to it, and it's a
Oh yeah.
very complex thing.
People have asked if we could release the video part of this podcast, and no way. Like I wouldn't even entertain it. It's too hard. Video is, I mean, just to get the audio for this show to sound halfway decent.
I have to put pants on too.
Instead of business up front, party in the rear, it's just business up top, you know? So, okay, Peggy's here and she's in the UK, so at any moment she could fall asleep. So let's start with you. Now, you've been on the show before. You've been on our first two Euro episodes, which has been a while. So I know we've talked to you before about your website, but why don't you recap the name of your website, maybe how you got started, why you started doing it, maybe what differentiates your site from other people's, and maybe a fun fact about a misspelling of your website's name.
So I started, I think, 2016. I'm just going back through some of the old posts. Sorry if my voice sounds croaky, but I've just recovered from COVID, and it is 1 o'clock in the morning. So I lived in Japan, and I at that time you could get lots of secondhand cameras very, very cheaply, um, and it was just kind of a hobby just to go down to the secondhand stores and buy some and film. You could get Fuji Industrial for like $2.50. So it was really easy just to go through, cameras and film and get them back in an hour. So I just would buy one, buy a film, wander around wherever I was, and get them back in an hour. And I kind of was losing track of which cameras I'd tried and which ones I hadn't. So I started to make a list, and that's really what the website is, Camera Go Camera. Often when I say it, people think it's Camera Girl Camera, and then occasionally people put in Go Camera Go, and that actually, I found out, leads to a soft porn site, which hasn't been used for a while, but it's still there. So I try and make it very clear it's no Camera Go Camera. Which was a play on Panda Co Panda, which means Panda Small Panda, which was a cartoon in Japan when I was there. So it's kind of all mixed and matched, but it was really just for me, and it's kind of stayed that way. I just write it for myself, and when people started to read it, I was always really surprised. And when I got like first comments, I'm like, oh my goodness, somebody actually reads this stuff, and it's just kind of snowballed from there.
And you've had some people send you some stuff too, right? For like from the US and
Yeah,
other
actually,
yeah.
quite a lot of people, especially in the UK. But yeah, there's a few people in the US that when they realise their cameras or camera that they have is not on my list, they will send it to me, which is really, really nice. Um, and some like I got a Konica auto reflex with a 90 millimeter lens, which I think is the one of the nicest gifts I've ever received, and that came from a very nice man called Roger in America, and he sent some film when it's been released in America, and I haven't been able to get it here. And there are some cameras that you can't get here so well, and you can get there very easily. Like for instance, the Argus C3. Another gentleman sent me that one. Which obviously for you is not so expensive, but sending it over here um, probably costs a lot more than the actual camera. But to get that camera here was quite hard.
Yeah, it's ludicrously expensive to ship from the US to the UK. I mean, to the point where it's just not worth it sometimes. And it's a shame too, because like, Theo's talked about this. We had, I can't remember his name, but we had a guy from South Africa on several episodes ago, many episodes ago, and he even said that in South Africa it's almost like a closed ecosystem. Like, in addition to it being extremely expensive, stuff often gets lost. So even if you're willing to pay the price to get something shipped to you from the US or somewhere else, there's a high probability it won't even show up anyway. So, they really only can get other cameras that are already in there. Now, I know that's not quite so bad for the UK, but the price does get quite high, which is a
It goes the
shame.
other way around as well. We have some cameras, obviously, that are hard to find in the US, and I'm willing to send them within reason as well.
What would be an example of something that's super easy for you, but maybe not the rest of the world?
I think that would be easier for you to answer than, and I go, yeah, I've seen lots of those.
Like a
Um,
perma special or something?
yeah, perma special. I've got the special and the Gosh, it's hard to think right now. The only one I haven't got is the speed.
The speed, yeah.
So there's three, and I haven't even seen a speed. They're quite rare, but the other two I can get quite easily.
Peggy, do you have a coffee and cream Kodak?
Kodak. Is
It
that
was it's a Kodak brownie that was made in London by
okay?
Kodak, and it's a light tan color.
Oh,
Um,
the brownie.
yeah, well, we call them coffee and cream over here.
Yeah, I do have a brownie.
I have two of those right now. That's a cute camera.
It really is, yeah. I did have one, and then I lent it to a friend, Analog Holly, and it was a year, and I wasn't getting it back. And I went, yeah, you can keep that one, because I knew I'd find another one eventually. And I think I have, but I think it's in, this month I'm having a junk month because I've got a box under my bed that I want to get rid of. And I think it's in that one. It's in that box. So I'm not sure if it works yet.
Do you see a lot of mentors?
Mentors,
Or
no.
sorry, I'm trying to say ensign Houghtons.
Oh, okay. No. To be fair, since I've come back to the UK, I don't go junk hunting as much as I did when I was in Japan. And a lot of people have given me cameras that I haven't had to. So if it comes to me, then I'll use it. But I haven't actually searched for cameras recently.
I've sort of befriended a guy in the UK. His name is CJ or Sishande, who he runs CJ's Classic Cameras, and he's got a lot of really great information on his site. And early on, I would email him. And when I got Kurt's stuff, I had come across a Bolta Fotovit,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he's a big fan of the Fotovits. But the Fotovits normally use its own film, but there were a very small number of them that used Kodak's 828 film, and I had one, but it didn't look like any of the ones that I'd seen online. So I talked to him about it, and he was like over the moon. He's so excited. He's like, "Are you ever going to sell that? Are you ever going to sell it?" And while I thought it was cool, it looked exactly the same as another Fotovet, and it just didn't really thrill me like it seemed to thrill him. And he's like, "If you're ever going to sell it, let me know. Let me know." And I'm like, "Well, it's not for sale, but let's trade. I'll trade you something for it." So he's like, "Deal." So I ended up sending him the photo of it. And speaking to what you said, Peggy, about cameras that are easy for us in America to find, but not so much over there. I knew he had an Argus, but I sent him a really nice Bolsey B2, which is another pretty common
Oh, yeah.
camera in
I
the US.
just got one of those from Roger. The
Oh,
same.
really?
Yeah, he sent me the Konica. He just sent me one of those.
A Bolsey? Okay.
It looks really pretty, and I'd never seen one before.
If you get them in real nice shape, they have a finish that oxidizes really easily. So sometimes they can look quite ugly.
Yeah, his is absolutely perfect. I was
Okay. So
really
yeah,
excited.
right, when they're in great shape, they're beautiful. So he sent me back a camera I'd never even heard of before. It's called an Agalux Agimatic. It's a tiny
Yeah,
little. I don't know how common this is. It's probably not that common, but it's a
I've
British
heard of it.
camera.
I haven't got
Yeah,
one. Yeah.
it's an interchangeable lens. I think the lens pops off. Maybe it doesn't. I honestly haven't spent much time with it, but it's got an uncoupled rangefinder and it's real small. I mean, here's an Olympus Ace for size. I mean, you
Yeah.
can see it's quite a bit smaller, but I think it's a real attractive camera, and I was much more excited to take this off of his hands than the photo of it. Considering it looked, even though it was an uncommon one, it looked just like everything else. But it's got this neat little trigger that is both the film advance and the shutter release. So you wind it, then it fires. Wind it, fires. So it's kind of, I don't know, kind of cool like that.
I think I tried one recently that's French. I'm just gonna look up the name.
A
God,
Royer.
no. Hold on, I'll come back to you. You carry on
Okay,
with your.
sure thing. So Alex, you've been on the show many, many times. Obviously, you're well known for your podcast and your website. I think not so much the cameras. You do a lot with film stocks and developing and all the different emulsions. And I'm always impressed with the various combinations and the dedication you have to take a film and develop it three or four different ways and share the results with that too. So, how did you get started? Like, what was that your original intent, or like, how did it evolve to where it is now?
My blog as it stands today, it's actually probably the third iteration of a blog that I had. I can't remember the first time I actually started a blog. but it was just a daily photo blog where I would just share a photo a day, something from my back catalog, something I'd taken recently that was just really fun just something fun I'd seen. I'd gone on vacation. I actually went back and found the oldest post I have on my current blog, which is from 2012. And I know I did stuff before that, but again, to Mike's comment, last year I had problems with my internet connection at home and my server at home, and I had to completely lift my entire site off of a box at home onto AWS. And Mike with a huge helping getting everything migrated over to Amazon Web Services. So I canned a whole bunch of old content in that switch. So really my current blog starts in 2012, and I just wanted it as a vehicle to share my photography and my love of history, specifically around the Anglo-American War of 1812. I didn't get into doing camera reviews until 2015, but the film reviews, I started seeing a bunch of stuff online and like, you know what? I could do film reviews better. I could do developer reviews better, especially developer reviews, because there aren't a lot of those online. You don't see a review for D76, you don't see reviews for HC110. A lot of those are sort of relegated to the old print space, which is both a blessing and a curse because I really had nothing to work from and nothing to go on. So I had to build that completely from scratch. I just love the fact that you can make one film look so different by developing it different ways, putting it behind a different filter. I'm actually working on scanning an absolutely roll that I completely butchered. Developing some Adox HR50 in a D19 clone. And the only time I found online was 1:1 for 14 minutes. And I'm like, that is way too much for a 50 speed film. So I dropped it down to 10 minutes, and it's still way too much for a 50 speed film. So it's just really trying something different. I mean, a lot of people do camera reviews. There's tons of them online. The stuff that you put out, Mike and Theo and Jim, are really the ones that I trust the most to really give a good indication of what a camera can do, the history behind it. But I like being able to be a bit of a mad scientist sometimes and play with chemistry, especially ones that aren't really that well known. Everyone knows D76, everyone knows HT110, ID11, but we have like two clones of Kodak D19 floating around these days, and it can make some film look really, really good. Like Tri-X looks absolutely fantastic in D19. Um, and trying to get the best results from these films because again, people just will ship them off to a lab, ship them off to the lab and go, I don't like how it looks. This film sucks. It's like, well, maybe try developing it differently.
Yeah.
Overexpose it a little, underexpose it a little, develop it normally, push, pull, right? Play a little bit around, make it your own.
Now, you had played a little bit with Scala, right? That's an interesting film
Yes.
because you need not only the right film, but you need a very specific developer that's not easy to find, right? Am I right on
Yeah.
that?
So there's only really two commercial home developing kits to do black and white reversal. So they're the Adox Scala kit, and then FOMA does a reversal kit as well. It's tough because you actually have to take your film out of the tank, expose it to light, and then put it back and develop it again, and then fix it.
Well, the thing about the black and white reversal kits, as opposed to, your standard black and white, or even with a, relatively long developing time, you might have like a 15-minute or a 20-minute developing time. There's just no way around the fact that once you start a black and white reversal, it's an hour from start to finish
Oh
for each
yeah.
batch because it's actually 10 steps, as I believe. You just have to be really focused and you can't slip up and you can't lose track of where you are. And it's like a process that you have to follow that is much more demanding than just 'cause of all the types of film developing I've done, and I've done quite a bit. It's the one that takes the most concentration and takes the most out of you to take it from start to finish.
Yep.
But the
No.
payoff, though, I've seen properly developed Scala, and
Oh, it's
it's almost like
gorgeous.
medium format out of 35 millimeter. I mean,
Oh yeah.
the sharpness and detail is out of this world.
I was lucky I was able to kind of guess at a double X and got double X slides, which are just incredible.
Well, I got to tell you that I've got a lot of like, I'm not afraid of just taking on any sort of development. If I get some chemicals that I'm not familiar with, I'm really happy to experiment with them. But I'm more of a film junkie, and I just hoover up any old film that I can find, and I love the more obscure or weird. And I can't tell you how many times that I've ended up going to your site because like I'll do like a Google brute force search about, how do I develop this film with this developer, and the only result is your page, so that ability to go and see like a film developed in four different developers and then be able to pick the one that's going to be optimal. And it's just such an incredible service to the community.
Yeah. It's very important to, I also do that on my Flickr page. I always make sure that I include everything and it's all in the tags. So it just makes it so easy for people to search because again, the combination of Tri-X and D19, I landed on a Flickr page about.
Let me ask you a question, Alex. As my site has grown and more people, know about it, and I have a feeling yours is going to be a similar experience, but people come to respect the things that you push, right? Or you post, the level of research and detail and the technical information you include. Do you find that in some ways you're a victim of your own, success, and that each time you want to write a new post, do you find it harder and harder to check yourself and make sure what you've typed is correct?
It was when I was doing like 4 reviews a month, right? I felt that in some cases I would just rush just to get it done.
Yeah.
So by going down to doing like one, maybe two a month, I find I can sort of, if I'm feeling really driven or really excited about a particular developer or a particular film, I can knock it off in like 2.5 weeks. But if I'm not, I still have at least a 1 to 2 month lead up before I actually publish it. So especially on more difficult cameras or difficult films to find developing combinations for, or developers that have so limited film combinations, like Formulary FX2 was a bear to not only mix because it was just so exacting, but to come up with film developing ideas because there were like two listed online.
Yeah. Now, Theo, you've been smart. You've never pushed yourself to pump out a review a week. Like you do take your time, right? Do you find that just is more relaxing and easier to put out quality content by taking your time?
Well, it is. It is. I don't set a timetable for myself. I basically decide on what I'm going to review next, or I have a list that I'm following, but I will shoot with that camera as being my main camera for quite a while and just get used to it and then enjoy it. And then when I've had enough, I'll start writing about it. So I generally get maybe 10 reviews out a year. So even though I started about the same time as you, Mike, I think I've had maybe 105, 110 posts. So since 2016, 17. So that's which is a very low number, but I enjoy getting into the quality of what I'm writing rather than
Right.
the actual quantity. Not that's not to say people that can do more, it's lower quality. It's just that for me, if I rush it, it's not going to be as good.
Yeah.
So I'm just absolutely amazed on how you guys do lots and lots and lots of posts and their quality is so high because I just couldn't keep up with that.
Mhm.
And then keep a day job as well. So that sort of gets in the way as well. But I believe Paul's actually got a blog that he started it all the way back in 2010, and I'm not sure how many posts he's got there.
Oh, I only have a couple. When I retired in May of 2010, I registered 3 domain names: thisoldcamera.net, thisoldphotograph.com, and thisoldsong.com, because I was also involved in music. I really haven't done anything with any of the three. The thisoldcamera.net, I think I've got 6 posts in the last 14 years. So don't include me out on this discussion. The other
And you
problem
thought
is,
I took my time.
yeah, I want to do it right.
I can't imagine how good the next one's going to be,
Yeah,
Paul.
it's going to be amazing. He spent so much time. This next review Paul's going to pump out. It's going to be the best.
My problem is I'm listening to you guys. My problem is I don't pay any attention to cameras. I would not be able to review a camera because I pick them up and I shoot with them. I don't pay any attention to the things that you guys are so good at, and that's getting into the details of the camera. You're very process oriented. I'm goal oriented. What I want to do is get a photograph, and it doesn't matter to me what the camera, how it does with it. I mean, I honestly just, I can't tell you probably more than four cameras that I think are really awful to use just because I don't pay any attention to them.
I would say of everything that's in my and this probably shouldn't be a surprise to anybody who really reads my reviews. This shouldn't be a surprise, but the actual shooting of the camera, the results, the sample images is the part I spend the least amount of time on. In fact, there have been times where I don't even know what I'm going to say in that last section of my review because I don't have an eye for lenses. Like to me, an image either looks good or it doesn't. The lens either is garbage or it's good. And I can't see the difference between a Heliar and a Septon and a planar. I mean, some people can, and that's great, but I can't. Like, so I don't want to sit there and talk about MTF charts and edge chromatic abrasions and barrel distortion and stuff. There's plenty other people that do a much better job at that kind of technical lens analysis than I even want to. I'm more interested in how to use it, what's cool about the camera, like maybe a feature, the Aggie Lux with the shutter release. That's also the film advance. Like that's neat to me. But then the history, I love the stories. I love the stories of the people, the technology, how it's made, the historical significance, and that's probably not a surprise to anybody. But that's the part that I'm the most excited to keep writing about. I honestly could get rid of the results, and I would still keep making stuff.
Yeah, you're Mike, with all respect to you, your website is actually one of the best services that you and Gandhi. And Gandhi isn't as prolific as you are, and he doesn't do the deep dives that you do.
He used
Um,
to. His site, I mean, when I look at his best articles, they're all 20 years old though. I wish he'd update it.
Well, and he's also, I mean, he has a lot of very good reference information. We're talking about CameraQuest,
Yeah. Hmm.
CameraQuest.com. I mean, he has some great information there on, especially on rangefinder cameras, Leicas and Nikons
Yeah.
in particular, and some lenses. But your website is so comprehensive as far as the history and different models and deep dives into a particular model. It's just a really good thing for all of us.
I'm glad. And I mean, I did it for myself, but that's how it turned out. And I'm cool with that too. I want to move it over to Eric. Eric, you've been on the show a couple times too. You're in the league, I'd say, in terms of frequency of posts and like Theo, like you don't pump out a ton, but I've always enjoyed reading the reviews that you've been able to push out, right? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I'd say in the past like year, I feel like I finally found my footing of like what I want to write, and it seems to be like 5,000 words is what I like, and
Mhm.
actually like using the camera, like the one I'm writing about right now. I think I'm on roll like 8 of
Oh wow.
shooting, which is painful in some instances, but sometimes warranted when you're working on it and repairing it at the same time.
Eric, what is your website?
Oh, it's aperturepreview.com. I've been running it for about like 5.5 years now. I'd say it started with me volunteering in the darkroom at my college, and my friends and I would always talk about reading your guys' websites and how we always enjoyed the content and how we wanted to do something similar. And instead of working on college work, I decided to make a website.
I found you had reviewed, I can't remember what it was. It was a Revere, one of the Instamatic cameras.
Is it
Yeah,
this
that's it.
one?
Yeah, that's it right there.
The Revere 1074.
And like what people have said about me, I for whatever reason needed some information on it. And literally there was one link and it was yours. That's it.
That's the thing that I try to do is I don't want to write about like the Nikon F or
Yeah.
things that everybody else has written about. I want to write about interesting things that people don't really talk about. And that's probably what I enjoy the most.
So when like me, multiple roles, I go through maybe, maybe a year sometimes with the camera. Do you ever get to the point where you decide you don't like this camera, but because you've gone so far that you've got to put another roll through because you haven't tested something out or you haven't tried something with it and go,
Yeah.
oh, do I really have to do this? And you're going, yeah, if I'm going to write about it, I've got to do it.
It got pretty rough with I think it was the Samoka 35-2. It just was boring and uninteresting. But I soldiered through.
What's the next one you're coming up with? What do you have a review coming up for us next?
It is this guy right here,
The Perfects.
the Perfects Deluxe that they started putting retina lenses on for a very short period of time. So it's been quite a challenge finding out where they came from and how it came to be. But the plan is this week, maybe.
Yeah, I have a number of the Perfects cameras. They started out with focal plane shutters, and then after the war, they switched to a leaf shutter. So I don't think I've ever seen one with a retina lens on it before. That's really cool.
They did it to try to like appeal to the higher end market right toward the end there, and I've been finding out a lot of interesting things about the company. One I'll share that's probably not going to be in the article is the one of the guys who started it, Joe. I can't remember the last name of him. In the same I guess office building, he worked at a radio company beforehand and it closed, and I only figured that out by finding a patent that he filed in like 1937, I think. So like most camera companies in Chicago, it started as a radio company.
Can you name two other fairly prolific camera makers that were also radio companies?
Argus and then Detrola.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Argus was originally International Radio Corporation, and they realized that they could make radios in the 30s out of Bakelite. They were really good at making Bakelite, and Bakelite was great for electronics then because it doesn't conduct. The problem is, though, is that they were so successful at selling radios. Most people, once you buy a radio, you don't need another radio. So their sales started like nosediving once they've sold enough radios to everybody who wanted a radio. Like, okay, what do we need to make something else. One of the Charles Vachor, I think his last name was, decided let's make a camera. And they realized that they were much more successful at producing cameras because they're easier to sell, they're smaller, and there was just a huge demand for them. So that they kind of branched off, forked the radio division and made cameras. And Argus was successful for quite a while. The Trolla didn't last quite as long, but they had a couple neat models too.
The thing I'm coming to realize is like American made cameras are very unique. Not
They
necessarily
are.
in a bad way, but like just more interesting, I'd say.
Have you ever come across a Claris MS-35?
Yeah, it's one of them sitting back there.
Okay, so you haven't, because I really like that camera. I hate that people call it like the American Leica because it's not. It is not
It's
at all Leica.
it's enormous.
It's huge. It does have a focal plane shutter. It is an interchangeable lens rangefinder. It does use 35 millimeter film, but beyond that, there's nothing else like about it. But in its enormity and tank-like design, it works quite well, and it has a lot of the same lenses that the Perfex lenses too. Usually Wollensak lenses, which are quite good. Amazingly, pretty much any camera I've ever shot, even something mildly high end like the Ansco automatic reflex, the premium TLR that they made, had Wollensak lenses on it, and they're quite good. They're very, very sharp.
Even the larger formats that use Wollensak lenses, I've
Yeah.
been impressed by.
Eric, is that a Bondi Blue iMac behind you there?
Oh, you bet.
All right. Not just cameras.
Wait, do you have a vintage computer blog too now?
Oh no. I'd say it's 50-50. I film photography and then I really enjoy repairing stuff. So I don't write about all of it because sometimes it's 40 hours worth of work that I don't take pictures of. But
You've mentioned this before, Eric, but promote yourself. Where do you work?
Oh, I work at a place in Milwaukee called Retrospect, and I'm a folding camera technician, and I'm the one guy there that knows how to repair the Polaroid flashes, the ones that are like built into the cameras for the 600 ones.
Nice.
And I had to write the guide, the 100-page guide on how to repair them.
Don't you also do the SX70s too?
Yeah, the folding ones, and I used to be the one guy doing all the 600, the hard-bodied ones
Okay.
before. But
Yeah. That's so you're in Milwaukee. So you're, I mean, I'm, near Chicago, Midwest United States, but I mean, it's a cool resource to have, someone with that experience of repairing the old Polaroids.
yeah,
Theo, there's a guy in Australia. We've actually tried to get on the show a couple times and it's just never worked out. But finding someone who specializes in old Polaroids is super cool.
Yeah, he's actually doing some really interesting and great work at the moment. He's actually starting to do adaptations of different types of, like for instance, he's pulling the actual ejection mechanism of a Polaroid 1000, the little box camera type Polaroids, the 670s, and being able to put it onto some of the ones that needed to take the peel aparts and putting onto the back of those and getting that to work and things like that, which is just absolutely astounds me on how people can actually work that out.
There's a guy in Canada too doing a lot. Hack Instant is his, I think, page. He's doing some amazing stuff with taking all the old Polaroids, substitute pack film, and converting them over to 120s and that new I-type film and shutter speed stuff. It's really cool.
I've printed a few of those for some of the pack cameras, and they're temperamental, but really cool.
Well, I have a question for the collective group here. The social media landscape has really changed over the last decade. And, we've seen the rise of things like, TikTok and YouTube really dominating the vintage film space. And, there's we have we have a podcasters chat, just like you all have a bloggers chat. I would feel like I'm safe to assume that none of us got advanced copies of the Pentax 17, and none of us got Rolly AFs in the mail a month in advance. As bloggers, y'all, you see your traffic. Has it been steady over the last 10 years? Do you find that there's like been a massive decline in readership and people just aren't going to you, or is it just that it doesn't have the shiny object benefit that like YouTube has, and so people just aren't as obsessed with it?
My website's been quite steady, and especially since the Dead Hand ones, the readership has definitely gone up. Yeah, it hasn't gone down at all. So I don't think TikTok and all those things have really altered that very much at all.
Yeah, I would echo Peggy's comments on that. Mine's consistently gone up. The first few years it would go up like 50%, 100% a year and so on. But the last 3 or 4 years it's been adding another 20% per year in terms of readership and it kept it going. Even though I'm not posting that much, the numbers keep going up. So I think there's a place for those blogs. And I think it's mainly to keep me off TikTok because I don't think anyone wants to see me dancing around in the street to music or anything like that.
I do think, I shouldn't say think, I'm quite certain that TikTok and, Facebook Reels and that bite-sized video content, I don't want to say a phase because it's probably never going to go away. But I do believe we're at this peak where there's a lot of attention with that. And that type of content delivery just doesn't really match long form reviews like each of us try to write. Mine are long. Eric, you said you like to keep around 5,000 words. Even shorter reviews, still, there's more content in a 3,000 word review. Hell, even a 1,000 word review than in a single TikTok video. And I've thought of, is there any way I can leverage some of this new stuff to even somehow do like a 60-second review? And it's probably doable, but I think you just need the right person, and you need, to some degree, attention deficit disorder, to be able to just blast people with information. My kids love watching specific YouTubers. And one thing that I've noticed about the most successful YouTubers, Mr. Bean is one of them. There's this one guy named Preston Plays. If you listen to these people speak, the way they're, for one, they're screaming constantly. It is amazing to me how often YouTubers scream or not, just talk really, really, really loud, but they also talk very fast and they're edited in a way where there's no space. It is like a psychological barrage of words and sounds. And I think that that overstimulation is why those things catch on with people because it's loud, it's in your face. But I don't think it lasts. I mean, I could be wrong. I think blogging is not new anymore, so it's not the shiny new penny. So certainly blogging does not hold a candle in terms of popularity. Even Stephen Dowling, who I'd hoped to be able to get here on this recording, his site is quite a bit larger than any of ours on here, but it's his best posts are usually his news posts. The announcement of the Pentax 17, a new Kickstarter or a new film emulsion. Those are the ones that blow up for him. Steven still does write some good reviews and he had one where he had Oleg Kalyevin talk about some prototype Soviet SLR that had never seen the light of day. And it was really well done and it was fascinating and I loved reading it, but that was not one of his biggest in terms of hits. If you want to go viral and you want to be trending TikTok star, YouTube star, you have to scream, talk really, really loud and fast with no pauses and be super short. And that's just not something I'm capable of doing. I can talk a lot, but to be able to make those kinds of videos that go viral that way, it doesn't work. So to Anthony's point, certainly blogging is not like that. I think that there is a built-in audience that we all have, and we probably get a lot of the same people over and over again. Ironically, prior to this year, I would have had the same answer that Peggy and Theo said, that my site has incrementally grown year over year. This year's actually going to be already, even though it's September, I already know that this is going to be the very first year ever in the history of my site where I don't beat the previous year, but it's not by a lot. I think I'm probably going to lose between 10 to 15% from last year, which is okay. I don't think it suggests that my site's dying by any means, but there is a certain type of person that will sit there and read a 3,000, 5,000, 7,000 word camera review than a whole bunch of preteen middle schoolers watching Mr. Beast sell chocolate to somebody. While we were on that very interesting diversion, Dan Cooney joined. Dan, another blogger. Welcome.
Hello.
Dan's out in California, so it's still like dinner time for him, right?
Yeah, I just finished. I told him we've got people over, so I told him I would take 15, 20 minutes and sit in.
I wanted you've been on before. We really didn't get a ton of time to talk, but I wanted to learn more about like what you do. Because I tell you what, man, you give me a run for my money on some of these obscure cameras. A real quick aside, and then I'll let you talk. Dan, what was the stereo camera you just posted a review for?
It's an Inoka, Inoca. So I purchased the camera probably 3 or 4 years ago. And at that time, they said that there were only 3 or 4 cameras that's all that they ever had. That's all they have. I purchased it and I bought it. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't overly expensive. But the funny thing is I went back to work, didn't do my blog for 3 years or so, came back, started piddling around with it again. And then I saw the Inoka and I'm like, I'm going to hunt around because I think that's probably a bunch of malarkey that there's only 3 of them available. And I can't find any information on it. I found a Leica. They were all tags in my blog post. There was a Leica sale for one that was 1,800 pounds 3 or 4 years ago. The one that I bought was actually from Camera Wiki.
Are you talking about the auction? The lights?
Yeah, the auction.
Okay.
Yeah. There was one, I actually purchased the one that's on Camera Wiki, I guess. But the person that I bought it from, he has an eBay name, but he's no longer around. There was another auction for another camera from some other German company. This was 6 or 7 years ago, and that's all I can find. I find no information about the manufacturer. They also made the Gem 16 and some other cameras, but really there's no information I can find on the camera manufacturer in Japan that made a few different cameras or this one.
And this may not work with something that rare, but I'll tell you what, a little tip, and this applies to everybody here. If ever you feel like there's more information you could include or you're missing something and you don't know where to find it, the best way to have to find that information is just post your review. And then
Yeah.
people will come out of the woodwork and correct you, or
Oh,
they'll
of course.
offer additional information. So that's happened to me a number of times where I've literally put in the review, I don't actually know if anybody does, please let me know. And sometimes it's like 20 minutes later. It's like,
Yeah.
why didn't you, like, how could I not have found you sooner?
Yeah. But the funny thing is, everybody that since I posted, and it's only been a week, not even that, like 4 days, everybody's like, I've never even heard of this camera. I
Yeah.
have no idea. I've never seen it.
So
So,
I recommended to Dan. I'm like, well, if there's another person you should ask, it's Ira Cohen. I've been to his home and I've said this so many times, but he just has an amazing collection. So I said to Dan, I go talk to Ira. We tagged Ira in it. And what did he say to you?
he doesn't do stereo.
He's like, I don't do stereos. It's like of this man's ridiculously large collection, he doesn't have a single stereo camera. And
Yeah.
and I believe him because while I was there, he has whole subsets of types of cameras he's just not interested in. So he just doesn't have any. He has exactly two retinas. He has a 117 and I think the last SLR. He doesn't have box cameras. He's not at all, surprisingly, he is not interested in 6x6 TLRs. The only TLRs he has are like weird ones, like 127, or maybe he's got a couple of the 6x9 perfectas or something like that. But like,
Yeah.
it's just crazy that there's whole subsets of collecting. He does not have a single stereo camera.
So just out of curiosity, how many cameras do you have?
I plead the fifth. I tried to do a count recently, and I tell you what, it's harder than you think. You know, when you have a decent sized collection, because you got to move them.
Yeah.
I actually thought it would be funny to see how much my collection weighs. So I came up with a number that I think is close to how many I have. And I tried to average, like obviously, you know, a Minolta or a Mamiya C330 is going to be a heavy camera and a Japanese hit camera is going to be a light camera. So I took like an average SLR with a 50 millimeter lens and like, you know, a Leica and a Japanese, you know, one of the 1950s fixed lens rangefinders, what I consider to be average size cameras. And I figured out what the average weight of an average size camera is. And then I did a rough estimate to see if do I have a ton, like a literal ton of cameras. And I don't think I do.
Yeah.
I don't think my collection quite weighs a ton, but I am at max capacity though in terms of shelf size. And whenever I
That's
see you,
impossible.
because you reviewed the French Antoflex, which is
That was a sweet camera. Yeah, I picked it up at an auction, and since then I've actually sold it. But that was probably one of my more fun cameras to shoot with,
yeah,
just because it had a revolving back, which I really
right.
love. I really love that camera.
Explain that a little bit more. What do you mean by revolving?
So the back of the camera, it's think of it as a regular twin lens reflex, but the camera actually rotates right by the camera body. So I can go, so imagine the lens here and the back, I can either rotate it this way or back, and it has a wedged in the corner. So you know if you're shooting vertical or horizontal. But it's a
So it's
6x9 camera that
right.
you can shoot vertical or horizontal and still use a twin lens reflex.
It's the only other camera that I know that does that is the Velta Superfecta, which is
Exactly.
also a
Yeah.
6x9 TLR that can do landscape and portrait. The oddity of the Velta though is it's also a folding TLR, whereas the
Yes.
Antoflex is just a behemoth
Yeah.
of a metal box.
Yeah, I've got some weird and unusual ones, but that's
Yeah.
they're not so weird and unusual that a lot of other people don't have what I have. This week I'm going to do the Calamar 616, the 660. I don't know if you guys are familiar. It's like the Fujika,
The Fujita.
yeah, Fujita or the Soligar,
Yes. Mhm.
similar
So
to that.
6x6 SLR.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you try to make it easy on yourself on occasion and pick a camera that maybe there is some information for you to find?
Oh yeah. No, I basically I have my desk is right in front of me, and I have, I don't know, 300 cameras in front of me, and I just look at it and I say, oh, here's one that I haven't played with. I mean, I'll probably do like the Bow Brownies, my collection of Bow Brownies somewhere down the road. I mean, I've got, some I love colored cameras, so I've got a lot of colored folding and box cameras. I just look at a camera and look at, oh, I haven't done something like this. I mean, I was even thinking about like I have an early Leica digital, and I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll just do something on that. So I try and do one a week. I usually start over the weekend and either shoot film over the weekend, process it, shoot pictures of the camera on either Monday or Tuesday, write the article on Tuesday or Wednesday, and then post it on Thursday.
See, Eric and Theo, Dan has an advantage over us is that he's retired.
I just retired, yes.
Yeah, he doesn't have small children. He doesn't have a day job. So that's a nice convenience. So right when you joined, we were kind of talking about, is blogging thriving? Is it staying the same? Is it dying? Like, how has your experience been with your site in terms of traffic?
I would love to have more traffic. Basically, I get maybe 30 to 50 people a day to my site. It's very, very slow. But then I have other things that I put on there too. Like I don't know if you saw the old Kodak negatives that I have. So I posted that
Yes,
on there.
the round ones.
I do a lot of digitizing negatives. So I've been starting to write stories about some of the negatives that I have. Some of the negatives that I worked on today were I purchased about 1,000 old negatives from somebody. I don't know if he was a photographer or a director or a producer in Hollywood in the 19 teens and 20s. So silent films. So there's all these pictures of very early Hollywood, pictures of Hollywood sets behind the scenes, just things like that. So I think if I write more for that audience, and I also would like to include more videos in my website, but I'm kind of deathly afraid of video. I've done one, I've done a couple, and I would probably use it more for like an Instagram story to drive business to the website.
Well, Anthony does a lot for us with Instagram, and I don't know, it doesn't work too well with reviews, but the negatives, because you've been doing this for a while, and
Yeah.
you've found some gems, like
Yes.
really gorgeous negatives that, like, sometimes I'll just stare at the faces of the people, and you imagine in your head the story of these people. Like, I have no idea who these people are,
Yeah.
It,
what
it sounds like
country.
this Hollywood collection could be a book.
It could. It really could be because there are pictures of a trip that he took through Europe, and there's very early pictures of like windmills in Holland and Amsterdam. There's pictures of him building his house up in the Hollywood Hills. I actually broke it down into four different sections. There's travel, there's building his house, there's old movies. There's a picture of, I don't know if he filmed it or if he just shot a parade in Philadelphia. And some of the photographs that he did are just stunning. As a matter of fact, excuse me, just 1 second. I was printing it today. There's just something about this picture, and I don't know if you can see it, but this is one of the pictures that just really grabbed my attention. It's
So
a
it's a
picture of a
woman,
woman just sitting on
a curb.
the sidewalk watching the parade go by, but she's cradling her baby.
That's
To
neat.
me, that's just a stunning picture. And her eyes are just beautiful. So
Yeah.
I find that
I'll
I
take
get
that over
very
Vivian
involved
Meyer.
in the pictures that I digitize.
Well, in what's you mentioned Vivian Meyer, but the one thing she did really well was the candid.
Yeah.
The stuff that back in the 50s and even before that, I think photography was more purposeful. People didn't just randomly walk around taking pictures of people observing a parade. And when you do see those pictures, it's much more of a glimpse. Nothing against Ansel Adams. Jeff and Gabe are going to make fun of me for ripping into Ansel Adams now.
Yeah, it's early street photography. And
Yeah, right. It doesn't give me the glimpse. A beautiful picture of Yellowstone, I could go there even now and still take a beautiful picture of Yellowstone, right? But to see a street scene from the 50s with the clothing and the hairstyles, and, people aged faster back then. You'd see pictures of, a woman in her young 30s, and she looked like an old woman sometimes.
Yep.
And just the look of I love cars, seeing old classic cars, architecture, buildings you don't see anymore. Just there's so
Yeah.
many cool pictures.
I agree.
My friend Adam Paul, who collaborated with many times, had found an Ektachrome slide in downtown Chicago of somebody standing right outside the Marshall Fields building facing west, and there's a Walgreens in the picture, a movie theater, and you see all these cars going back and forth. And I've been to Chicago and stood in that exact same spot and recreated that scene from that slide, which we guess was taken around 1955. And that I think that stuff is fascinating, and I love that you do that, Dan. And
Yeah.
while I do really, really enjoy your reviews, they're very good. And you do get some really rare oddball cameras out there. I think that in terms of developing a following, you may have more of a success with Instagram, or like Anthony said, even making a book, because
Yeah.
people love that kind of stuff.
Well, one thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to take my camera reviews from blogs and just put a personal book together, with all the pictures. And I mean, it's my collection, so it's just kind of my memories more than anything.
Sure.
We'll see.
All right, it looks like Jim Gray's joining us. Jim's another blogger, a guy that I've talked to. Theo and I are in a private chat together. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Hey, it's great to be here, Mike.
All right. You want to maybe just, for anybody who's not familiar with your site, like give a quick introduction, what you do?
Yeah, you bet. So my site is called Down the Road. It's at blog.jimgray.net, and you spell my last name Grey the proper way. I started it in 2007. I was freshly divorced. I needed a hobby, and blogging was free. That was huge in those days. And I've always had kind of the itch to write. I did some writing early in my career, many, many years ago, and I kind of missed it. And so I started writing. So my blog isn't 100% about film photography. It's just a major portion of it. I write about whatever I want, right? So I publish 6 days a week. So I like to say, if you're not interested in what I published today, just wait, come back tomorrow. There'll be something else. So, but the film photography aspect of it came in because I just decided I was going to write about whatever interested me. And I've been interested in film cameras since I was 8 years old, which was way back in 1975, a minute ago. And I've collected them ever since. And at my peak, I had like 300 cameras. Now I'm down to about 50 because, you can only store so many in your house.
Yeah, you were doing a liquidation of cameras for a while there, where you would shoot a camera and then have to decide whether you wanted to keep it or not.
Whether it stayed or went. That was Operation Thin the Herd.
That's what it was. Now, how many stayed?
About 50. Yeah. And at this point, I'm probably at like 65, but it's because I keep buying them to review them, because reviews remain one of the top things on my site, mostly from a search perspective. They drive a great deal of search traffic. Organic traffic is kind of indifferent to it. When I publish a camera review, I might get 100 views in the first week. But then if you look at the stats over time, month by month, it just keeps climbing as people find one of those cameras in their dad's drawer or whatever and want to learn about it.
One of the things that I always found interesting about your site is maybe you don't have the traffic of a huge site, but you get a ton of engagement. Like, I'll see you post something, and before I even have a chance to see it, you could have 4 or 5 comments from readers. So it seems like you have a really loyal following.
I've really cultivated that. I got some advice from an old friend who is in the SEO marketing space, and he told me reply to every comment every time. And what that'll do is it'll encourage people to keep coming back and keep commenting. And he was so right. And it's interesting, Mike. It actually is a situation where there were people who used to comment who just quit, and I miss them. I wonder what happened to them. I hope they're okay, right? But I do have a fair number of regulars, and sometimes now I even have conversations happening among them, and I don't even have to do anything. So
yeah, I think that's really cool. And I mean, in terms of putting up a blog, you getting something out of it, like you said, you got divorced and you just enjoyed writing and wanted to write about stuff that you love, but you kind of get this little community that you have that it sounds like that has stayed with you for quite some time.
And it's actually really important to me. I mean, I'm surprised how important it is to me. I mean, I have plenty of 3D people in my life, my whole family, my wife and our kids, and many good friends. But these people that I only know as electrons on my screen, it's pretty cool. They call that parasocial relationships. And I get a great deal of benefit out of it. Matter of fact, my commenters encouraged me to start developing my own film. I finally relented and did it. And then as I shared my work bit by bit, they gave me tips and advice on how to get better at it. it was like a master class from the people who read my site. It was wonderful.
Yeah, in a weird way, I had a similar experience too, in that when I first started, I just sent my film off. I used Dwayne's photo, I used the dark
Yeah.
room, and just the thought of doing it myself just seemed so difficult. Like, I don't know why. I guess I just thought I couldn't do it. I wasn't
Hmm.
interested in learning how. I didn't have a dark room. I didn't have the space, whatever. And a guy that I met through the site that I had become friends with just kept encouraging me to the point where he actually just mailed me a bottle of Fixer, a bottle of Developer with some step-by-step instructions, said, you're going to do this. And when I finally relented, I mean, it was such a game changer, because being able to develop and get the results the same day you shot it, the money you
Hmm.
save,
Yeah.
even a camera that you want to test that maybe you're not even sure if it works, you can just cut, if you have a
Hmm.
bulk roll of film, cut a little 10 exposure strip just to see results immediately. And if, in terms of reviewing and going through, you said you had 300 cameras, whether you have 3 or 300, when you first start
Hmm.
using these things, there's no guarantee they work. So being able to develop the
No.
film yourself is, like I said, a game changer.
Actually, that's what I've taken to doing. The first roll I shoot in any camera I'm testing is always black and white.
Yeah,
And it's usually a short roll so that I can just develop it real fast and see if the thing's functioning properly before I commit to, and I just use, whatever film, expired Tri-X, right? Something like that just to test it out.
sure.
But actually, I had a similar situation to you. One of my readers said, look, you need to develop your own film. And I've got this tank and reels and a changing bag that I never use anymore, and I'm mailing it to you. That's what got me
Yeah.
started. Yeah, readers have actually sent me film and cameras. It's just crazy.
I have talked before about sometimes the success, I don't want to say bites me in the butt, but it does kind of come back at you in the sense that you have so many people who enjoy your what you write. You have this kind of standard that you've set for yourself. Like, hey, I want my
Mhm.
articles to at least be consistent, a certain tone or whatnot. But then
Yeah.
you kind of feel like I have to live up to that every single time that I write something. You
Yes,
have that
that's
feeling?
true. I absolutely do. And I've written about that a couple of times, and my readers are clear. Cut it out. Look, you publish 6 days a week. You don't have to. The world is not going to end if you don't do that.
Yeah.
Just relax, kid. We like your work. We'll be here whenever you publish. You don't have to kill yourself to do it. So
So when you review a camera, how do you choose what the next one's going to be? Is it just random?
here's how I do it. I have every now and again when I feel like it's time for me to replenish the supply and get a queue of cameras to review. I have saved searches on eBay, film cameras ordered by ending soonest and vintage cameras ordered by ending soonest, and I just look at them for the cross between interesting and bargain. That's what I do.
You purchase or acquire a camera with the intent of then reviewing it, and then you
Yeah.
do it, right? Okay.
Yeah. It used to be until about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, I was building my collection and I was going after specific cameras. Well, I have the cameras that I like now, and I
Right.
want to be able to keep using them. So now I just buy cameras to review them. I've reviewed, I don't know, 300 cameras over the time on my site, right? I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You know what you're doing, right?
Sure.
You can compare and contrast and to other cameras, and you can say, well, I can see what they were going after here based on what it is, and I can see that this was either brilliant in its field or not so brilliant in its field, or whatever the case may be. And then I turn around and I either give away the cameras or I sell them again.
So you flip a lot then, and then you just move on to the next one?
Yeah, and by flipping, it's not like I'm trying to make a profit. I mean,
Sure.
I
Just
might
get the
spend
money back so that you could put it into something else.
exactly. That's exactly it.
Okay. Most people should know the camera that I hate the most. The one that I've reviewed, the worst rating I've ever given, one that I've just trashed. Do you have one like that you absolutely hated?
I do. The Canon Dial 35. What a piece of garbage. Holy crap, I hated that thing.
I have the Dial 35, and I have the Dial Rapid, which is
Ooh.
basically the same camera, but it's designed for that cassette to cassette rapid film that they did for a short while. But if you
Yeah,
notice, it looks more like a normal camera. It doesn't have that weird kind of
it does.
one-handed operation. So
Yeah, it's a
I don't know
standard.
maybe I'll send this one to you and see if you hate it just as much.
I'd have to get rapid cartridges and I could actually bulk load the film now. That's a
Yeah,
thing.
it's pretty easy. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Mine's,
really is.
I've talked about this many times. It's the Konica AI Borg.
Oh, right.
What's so infuriating to me about that camera is that, like, you can tell they tried. Like, this,
Yeah.
like, clearly the Chinese cameras, the big royal view and the
Mhm.
Canomatic, whatever, those
Mhm.
things are worse. Like, right. I mean, the AI Borg is a better camera than those. But
Right.
for me, the difference is Konica was trying. Like they really
Yes.
tried to make a good camera and they failed so spectacularly bad that that's why to me that's the worst camera ever made, even
Yeah.
though it's objectionably better than the scammers or the trash cams.
The scammers, they knew what they were doing.
Right.
They were
Putting
trying
lead
for,
weights
yeah,
and make them heavier.
exactly.
Yeah. This is the blogging show. Peggy had to drop off too. She finally got tired listening to us put her to sleep. So
I think it's the thought of having to face a class full of 20
that's true.
25 6 year olds that's scaring her at the moment.
She's a school teacher, yes. But we have AJ here and we have Will, who am I correct? You guys do not have blogs, at least not yet.
I do not have a blog. I consume a lot of them.
I don't have a blog yet or a podcast. I do have a YouTube channel, although with my job I don't have much time to do videos. So most of my stuff, I've got over 60 live episodes, which I started during the pandemic because evidently I work with the public. I work for a retailer and I'm a teacher, a photography teacher there. And when the pandemic closed the store, after about a week, I was going stir crazy. So I figured to keep in practice for my teaching, I would start doing the YouTube thing, which was all live. And it actually opened the door because we started doing webinars with the closing and opening and closing and opening because we actually have a college department. And maybe I listened to too many podcasts. I don't know. I listened to Alex's. I listened to yours. I don't know if I'm intimidated or I've had an account with Buzzsprout since the pandemic, and I got like 5 minute episodes wishing everybody a happy new year for the first 3 years. Do you guys have any tips for us who'd like to get into it?
Honestly, it all starts with just an idea. You just scream into the void. You just put it out there and you just be proud of the stuff of what you do. And if you are confident in what you put out, it shows and people will latch onto it. I started my YouTube channel in 2020 again as something to sort of extend my blog, extend my photography, and those first videos were rough. But I gained confidence, I gained presence, and I just improved my skills. I read a lot. I watched some YouTube videos on how to improve graphics and do video editing and just learned and eventually got better equipment along the way. And
Okay. I mean, I just came back from a weekend of doing conferences. I did 4 conferences, two on developing in front of 100 people, literally a workshop live. And I listened to some of your episodes too, and I'm like in the car, I'm driving in the car, and I'm like, oh my God, I could say something about just what Mike said or what Alex said, and it's yeah, but it's already been said. So
your voice matters. Just because someone has said it doesn't mean you can't, because you put your own stamp on it.
It also helps people looking up for things as well, because if they see one person say something and have an opinion on something, it can be like, oh, is that a random opinion? Is it, but if there's a few people sort of putting up, a review or a technique or whatever, and they've repeated a very similar thing, but in their own way. So I'm not sort of suggesting people copy each other, but in their own way, it reinforces people on something. Oh, that might be something I should really try because it obviously works, or it's obviously worth using or doing or etc.
okay.
So I wouldn't stop because someone has already said something or shown something or written something. I'd still do it because even if you look at what Mike and Eric and Alex and I and Peggy and Dan and everybody else writes about, they're writing about old cameras. I mean, they got written about 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So, I mean, it's not, we're writing something new about them. It's not like we're the first people reviewing it either. We haven't got the latest, Pentax 17 and we're up there trying to be first with it. So
I mean,
yeah.
and the reality is, I don't, even if someone were to hand me a Pentax 17, I would want to try it, but I don't know that I would want to write on it because, for one, it wouldn't be timely. There's already so much information. There's nothing I could add to it. The best advice to someone wanting to do this, it has to be something you want to do, and find your own niche. And you're not going to know what that niche is right away. Like I said, I wrote my first review in December of 2014, and my site didn't even become full-time cameras until 2 years later. Like I was still writing crap that has nothing to do about with cameras. I do movie reviews. I had a post about how to write a good resume. I mean, I was just making that's honestly why my website's called MikeEckman.com, and it doesn't have a cool camera name. Like Go Camera Go. Because it didn't start out that way. It literally was just a personal blog for me to just share my random thoughts to, and it transitioned that way. So, to get started, you have to do something that you love for two reasons. One, you need to enjoy it, but two, you'll never be able to keep wanting to do it. If you're just doing it to become an influencer, don't do blog.
No, absolutely. I
Don't become an influencer either. Be an
yeah.
encourager.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and apart from the fact that I think Mike actually referred to the soft porn site rather than Peggy's site just then,
I know.
I will just to make sure people don't follow that. What you also have to do is develop a bit of a thick skin,
Yes.
Mm,
because there's a lot of keyboard warriors, nasty people, antagonists, whatever you want to call them out there. They'll try and bait you. You don't want to sort of buy into that and respond
Yeah.
to a lot of that stuff. Sometimes you just have to ignore if someone's sort of, putting up stuff, or even just block them. You don't react.
I've been in retail for the last, well, retail, I've been all my life, but in photography, I've been in retail the last 10 years. And as a main instructor where I work, I focus on the photography more than on the equipment. You guys are giving me a lot of good ideas.
If you want to blog, do it. And the great thing about blogging in the film camera community or the film photography community is there's so many of us out there doing it. What my advice is, set up your blog. I recommend just getting a free one at WordPress. It's easy. You may not stay there forever, but it's a great place to start. And then go comment on other people's sites, they'll click through. The owners of those sites will click through to see you if they see that you have a link, and you'll start to build a following that way. Because, all of us in this community are kind of nerdy in our way. And we all are interested in this, and we want to find other people who are interested in it, right? And you can totally build a following that way. And I was just wrote about this on my site today about, people who really seek hard to like get gallery shows for their photography and stuff like that. And you can do that, but there's a lot of effort involved in that and expense. But a free website on WordPress or even Blogger, if you want to do that, Blogspot, whatever it's called these days, you can show your work and you can build a following, and it doesn't cost you a dime above and beyond what it costs to, for the cameras and the film. And more people can see your work that way than you would ever get trying to figure out the whole gallery route.
If I could add something here as a non-blogger, there's something to be said for having a record, having a searchable text-based record for this information that's incredibly valuable. I mean, I've listened to so many podcasts over the years. I can't tell you how many hundreds of episodes of negative positives or classic camera review I've heard. And if there was something like about one specific camera that I wanted to go back and reference and learn about, it's almost impossible. It's like podcasts are not a searchable database. YouTube
No.
is not a searchable database.
Right.
And the
Right.
idea that somebody would still take
TikTok.
the time
None of that is.
to write it up and put it out there it's a valuable service. It's something that it's kind of easy to overlook in the moment of how many likes you get, but at the end of the day, likes are ephemeral, and having information that's sticky is more valuable.
Yeah.
That's a really good point about sticky, because I find that some articles that I put out there initially get nothing. And you think, oh my God, I just spent, hours and hours putting this thing together, and it's just doing nothing. And then a couple months down the track, I'll notice that it moves up the rankings, and suddenly it's becoming really popular because somehow it gets caught up in the algorithms or whatever, and people are actually searching for it. And it's giving people that information that they're actually after. And so it's not, to Anthony's point, it's not about the initial likes or the initial numbers that you get too. So, you don't get discouraged that way. You just let it sort of grow into its presence as well.
And it's very strange which one of your posts will become sticky. Like, in it
Oh yeah.
you'll never be able to predict it. You'll think, oh man, it's going to be this Leica review that I did, or it's going to be this rare French camera that I'm the only person in the whole world that's ever written about it. In the history of MikeEckman.com, nearly 10 years, the review that has been clicked on the most is the Nikon One Touch AF3 that I wrote back in like 2016. It's a point and shoot. That's it. That's my number one most clicked on, downloaded, whatever you want to call it, review ever. And it's like, why that one? Like, I get it that it's a point and shoot and people like point and shoots, but why that one? And who's reading it? Why does that review have the legs that it's had, that where people, and it's not a lot. Like, I'm not saying thousands and thousands a day, but over the course of the past 7, 8 years, it generates 10, 20 clicks a day somewhere. Probably a bot doing it, to be honest with you. But nevertheless, it's the one that has persevered and maintained and is still, readable. Like to Anthony's point, not a great discussion that we had with Carl Havens in episode 29 of the Classic Lenses podcast. Like, it would be impossible to find that information, not impossible, but very, very difficult. Whereas a blog, and if you're lucky, it'll get picked up by the Wayback Machine, which, for any of us that do a lot of digging, I found a ton of great information. We always call it Web 1.0, those early internet websites from the late 90s, early 2000s. That information, none of those websites are still around, or very, very few. But you can still usually find that information in the Wayback Machine, and that's another way of archiving and preserving this information that we write.
Yeah, I was going to say, as a consumption of all of this stuff, you mentioned like when it started with web pages for me way back. I think it's probably been 20, 25 years ago when I started to get into collecting more cameras, and I was getting them, and they were really cheap, but they were broken. And so when I started collecting them, I'm like, oh, I want to find out about them and how to fix them. And then I really like 127 format and square format, and you would hear something and then I'd read something else. And it's interesting to see how it started from people who are really passionate about something, who would just have this great website full of all this information, and a lot of them are gone now. I'll go to my bookmarks. I'm like, they're gone. But then the evolution of that into the blogs, and it was really cool. Like, as the blogs started, and I'd go to look for something new, or film developing, or techniques, and you'd start to find these blogs of people who were, writing about this sort of passion, but also stuff they were just figuring out. Because as digital was coming in and film photography was kind of going away in that one time period, you had all this activity of people trying to preserve it or do something different. I forget what Silver Farm, was like making film again and all this stuff. And so following that, it was really cool. And then to come into like now, and I stumbled upon Camerosity from YouTube at work. I listen to YouTube all day long. And I'm always looking for camera repair stuff or just information. And I think I looked something for Camerodactyl, and then Camerosity popped up in like the list down below. And I'm like, oh, that sounds amazing. Now I just listen to Camerosity like all day long, all the time. It's so comforting. And then I think Alex too, I think I was looking for something. I think I was in a forum somewhere about developing an old film. And like you popped up in there, and I didn't connect it. I think I read what you wrote, and then I saw you on one of the episodes here, and I was like, "Wait, that's the guy who does all the film developing stuff." So it's kind of really amazing to me. But like you said, I think the searchable database, like the video content is really great, but being able to like search for the items and the content and is so valuable, and so much of it really I think is going away. The old stuff, the sites are gone, and unless you use the Wayback Machine, I'll go to do a search for something I knew I would find before, and I don't find it anymore.
Yeah.
It's like I know there was a guy or a person or site,
And the Wayback Machine works best on that old, what I called Web 1.0, like pure HTML. There's a little bit of JavaScript that it can preserve, but like, I use WordPress. Most of us use WordPress. I don't even know how well the Wayback Machine can even render PHP based. I mean, I'm getting techie here, but the backbone, like I don't do any HTML. Like nobody does that anymore. That's just not how you build websites. It's all block editors and you copy and paste. I mean, I'm literally writing in a web version of Microsoft Word basically. And it makes it easier to author posts, but I just wonder when this generation of bloggers goes offline, how are those archival websites going to be able to handle that? I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I get really excited when I'm researching a camera and I do find an old website from 2004, or it may not even be in English, so I'll sometimes use a combination of the Wayback Machine and Google Translate at the same time, trying to translate this Japanese website from 2003, and if I can get anything useful out of it and put that back out there, like that excites me. Like I feel like I found something, even though it's only 20 years ago in the world of the internet. That's ancient history, and to be able to preserve that is what really, really keeps me going, is because I want future people that find these cameras. Because the reality is we don't own any of the cameras we have. We are custodians of them, right? At some point, we're all going to be Kurt them, and these cameras are going to be somewhere else, right? And maybe those people are going to want to know more about these cameras and go back and be like, oh, okay, I have a tie back to people who are preserving the information from the first time it was out there. And I think that's super cool. AJ, anything else?
I'm just
Are you
just
inspired?
Yes, I am.
We were talking, Mike, you're talking about researching, and sometimes it's a question of pulling strings and just keep pulling the string until you find what you want. I've been pretty active on Reddit lately. There's a Hasselblad group, a subreddit, that somebody was talking about panorama backs for Hasselblad cameras. And this studio, and I don't even know where he is a guy named Louis R. Zun, Z-U-N, photography. And he had made one. He had made a panorama back for Hasselblad, and it really worked. I mean, it was well done, but it wasn't great because of the masks keep falling off and jamming up the rear shutter. But he found somebody in China who would modify a Hasselblad A back to do either 22.5 by 56 millimeter or 28 by 56 millimeter. So you'd get 24 or 27 exposures on a 120 roll. And the guy that did them was a guy named Mr. Zhang, and there was absolutely no information about it on the internet. A couple of people said, oh, yeah, I've got one. I love it. But no way to get in touch with him, nothing. So I researched this for about a week and finally posted something on, I think it must have been on the Camerosity Facebook page. And one of our listeners, Daniel Smith, had one and had got it fairly recently. He sent me the information on how to do it, what the cost was, an email address for the guy, and I shipped two A24 Hasselblad magazines out yesterday for the 24 conversion because I wanted the 28 by 56 millimeter size. So basically, what it is an X-band negative shot on a Hasselblad camera.
Like a 500, like a Hasselblad 500?
Yeah, any 500 CM,
okay,
or 503 or super wide or whatever.
What's the turnaround for getting it?
About 3 months.
Okay.
It takes about a month to get there, and then they're backed up a little bit, so it's about 2 months shop time.
That's actually pretty reasonable.
Well, he takes the gears out.
Right.
So he replaces the gears and also replaces the counter. So when you advance it, it actually goes from 1 to 27 or 1 to 24, depending on which back you get. And he sends a viewfinder mask to go along with it.
And it's entirely contained in the back?
Yeah, it's all
That's
one
awesome.
piece.
So then you just want to go back to 6x6, you just use a different back.
Sure, use a different back. I mean, 24 backs have so little value. And I just bought 2 Hasselblad kits. And in one of the kits were 2 A24 magazines. They're worth $100 a piece to sell them.
Yeah.
So I thought, what the hell? I'm just going to go ahead and modify them both.
That's cool.
And I'll shoot them, and somebody will buy them because, X-Bands, as cool as they are, X-Bands are all ticking time bombs at this point.
Ludicrous prices.
Yeah. They're expensive, and there's no guarantee they'll continue to work.
Yeah, but you can always just shoot them best camera in the world, the Mamiya 7, which does the panoramic
But
as
you could
well.
get a Mamiya 7 and put the panorama adapter on it. That'd be the ideal
Which is what
situation.
I do all the time. It is fantastic.
Ooh.
You're driving Mike to drink.
Well, okay, weren't we supposed to when somebody said Mamiya 7, weren't we all
Yeah,
supposed to
that's what I'm doing. I did it in last episode too.
It's the middle of the day for me, guys. I can't join in that one.
This is how do you pronounce this, Paul? Do you even know?
Lafroig.
Lafroig. It's a
Lafroig.
Lafroig.
yeah. It's I've never tasted a scotch like this. It's incredibly smooth, and I do like but you have to have at least like 3 drinks of it first because the initial bite is. Ooh, that was tough.
So I shouldn't mention the Mamiya 7 again.
Oh, there you go.
Well, on that note, I think this has been an interesting discussion. It's not a typical episode for us. I am aware that it's been several episodes now since we've had a lot of gas. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing because, people sometimes curse us for making them spend money on things. But on the other hand, we all do like talking about our recent pickups and acquisitions. But I think the blogging is an extension of this podcast. I promise you this podcast wouldn't exist if I didn't have my blog first. I would have never met most of these people. And I think, just to circle back to one of the questions earlier, blogging is not new. It's nowhere in any shape or form going to be as successful as TikTok or Facebook Reels or whatnot. But I do think it has legs. I think the content is sticky. It's searchable. It's going to be around much, much longer. It's going to be, honestly, I would be willing to bet you go forward in time far enough, this will probably be what historians are probably looking at. So hopefully we get as much of this information as we can right and try to not misrepresent the past. But I think that that it's important to do, and I would encourage someone to do it. You're never going to be famous. You're not going to make a lot of money. The best case scenario, Alex mentioned he moved his site over to Amazon, which is where I'm at too. Amazon has a great platform for hosting blogs, but it's not cheap. It's one of the more expensive options, but it does have some advantages that some of their hosts don't. So if you're lucky, you could have, if you decide to run ads, that will offset the cost that you pay each month to host it. I hate the ads on my site. I wish they weren't there, but it's a necessary evil.
I don't have any alcohol with me right here, but if I could pour one out for 35 MMC and Emulsive, which were 2 blogs that were incredibly influential on me when I started getting back into film like 7 years ago. And Hamish and M were like readily available on podcasts.
Yeah.
You always heard the voices, and personal lives, they get messy, and podcasts and blogs go away. And I think both of those sites are still, they're not zombie sites, but like I was just looked at Emulsive, and the last time M posted anything was in December of last year.
Yeah. M did sort of follow. He was part of the group that Dan, Theo, Alex, and Eric and I are in, but he dropped out quite a while ago. But Hamish is still fairly active. He goes on hiatuses here and there.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, they'll just inexplicably disappear. There's many blogs that just don't exist anymore. Matt Denton had a website that I've reviewed, looked at his reviews before. Mike Keneally, he does still post stuff, but not reviews like he used to. Karen McNamara, something like that. She had a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of great websites that just don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
It was photo ethnography, I think was Karen's site.
That's right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Every once in a while, she'll get things show up on Google search. So, all right, we are gonna record 2 weeks from today. So that means that our next episode will be recorded on September 30th. We don't yet have a topic. We do probably need to get back to some kind of gas discussion. There was a request on the Discord to do an entire episode on Exactas or toy cameras. We did cover the Exactas quite a bit in the East German episode, although we didn't dedicate the whole thing to it. So maybe there's something there if you guys would like to hear that. I think an episode about toy cameras would be interesting. I don't know that I have much I could contribute, though, to that. So that's, I think, the challenge sometimes when we get these suggestions. While I'm open to anything, it's difficult to dedicate an entire episode to something that I don't really know what we would talk about though, because we have to have some kind of experience with it. So
We could have Paul lead the pinhole episode.
the pinhole episode. Yeah. I have the Leonardo still here, Anthony. I haven't sent it. This was a Kurt camera. It's the Leonardo pinhole camera. So I need to get this off to you soon and see. It's got an F250 pinhole on the back of it.
I love pinhole cameras.
You know what? I'm going to send. I have a 6x12 pinhole downstairs that came from Kurt. I'm going to send that to you too.
Oh,
you'll have all kinds of panos.
He's going to have double pinholes.
Oh, take me back to my college days.
Or I just have a brand new Quaker oatmeal box that I just finished off. So I could send that.
Absolutely.
Pinhole.
Well, does anybody remember the solar can or solar can?
Yes.
That was a pop can, and you would leave it out for like a year or something like that. I remember that was kind of a weird project that someone did. So anyway, I digress. As always, the topics and discussions on the Camerosity podcast are influenced by you. We love having people come on the show. Please, please, please don't think you have to be a blogger or a hot hit celebrity podcaster to come on the show. We want new listeners. We want people who are beginners to shooting film, to collecting. We love when people ask us questions. In fact, I think those are the best episodes where we get people to ask us questions and you steer the discussion so that we don't ramble down some of the same topics that we do on occasion or not. I don't know. Anyway, I think that La Frega's hit me like harder than I thought it would. I'm getting flushed here.
Mamiya 7.
Oh man. Yeah. All right, you guys have a great night, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Good night, all. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Have a good one.
Good night, Mike.
Home Depot and legit advertisers want to make sure that their ads aren't showing up on extreme exposure websites. So you have to have content that's appropriate in order to be eligible to have ads run on your site. Otherwise, you won't get any money for it too. So they do these periodic checks to make sure your content is appropriate. And if they think that it's not, it'll get flagged and no ads will run on those pages. And they'll usually tell you why that it was flagged as inappropriate. So there's a spot I can go that will tell me every single violation on my site, and it's for cock, because I talk about shutters cocking or cocks. I have to cock the shutter. So I have the word cock appears on my website so often that there's whole segments of my site that Google has flagged as potentially inappropriate.